Hello, Tim.
Hi there. Hi, everyone.
Now, are you at your hospital or are you at Westminster or an adjacent building to Westminster? Because that beautiful backdrop you've got on this Zoom call.
Yeah, this is the view from my hospital. So I'm sitting in the office at the end of one of the old hospitals in London, St Thomas's Hospital, which is on the River Thames on Westminster Bridge. So yeah, I'm very lucky. One reason I haven't moved in nearly 30 years is I have a fantastic view every day when I go into work.
Ah, and that's huge for your mental health and your energy levels, isn't it? Just to be able to calm yourself, take a look, and then go back to whatever it is you're doing that might be stressing you out.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I cycle into work, so that's even better. So I get to see all this stuff, all seasons, and it's always fun.
Wow, you've got it all going on. That's great. Now, we are all as different as we are the same when it comes to our responses to food. You have done game changing research, but would that, in a nutshell, be your main megaphone message to the world?
I think, well, my megaphone message to the world does change, but the current one is yes, we're all different. We all respond differently to food, and the gut microbiome inside us is crucial to why we're all different.
Yeah.
And if we all understood that better, we'd all be able to eat better and have a healthier planet.
I didn't frame you up in the intro, but I will now. You're a professor of genetic epidemiology. You're head of the Department of Twins Research at King's College London. You're the author of nearly 1,000 research papers, four best selling books, including The Diet Myth. I read that a few years ago. It was great. And your latest, Spoon Fed, why almost everything we've been told about food is wrong. And I am going to stop there because I could go on for days to recite all of your titles and accomplishments and awards, but I will mention the OBE. So I just invite anyone who wants to hit pause here to put my guest in more context. Just hit pause, do a swift Google search, and you will find out all you need to know and more. And then come back to us, okay? Because let's get into food, glorious food, and your game changing predict study, which grew out of your game changing twin study. I Both of these projects are fantastic and such eye openers for anyone who's digging into nutrition science. And I mean, how the heck, having had this research, are we still skirmishing over generic eating plans?
Well, that's the big question. Why are we stuck in the last century, really? And why is nutrition lagged behind the other sciences? Both in the scientific level and also at the policy level. And I think it's many factors for that. And as I discuss in Spoonfed, one is the fact that it's a new science and has never really got on the same level as the other sciences. It doesn't, no one's had a Nobel Prize really in nutrition. It's all in physics and maths and genetics, and nobody in med school goes into nutrition. So the medical fraternity have avoided it, always seen as the most boring area of science. And it's never had the funding. So to do the big studies it needs to do, it needed the sort of money that genetics has been getting the last 20 years to really come up with the results. And so what's filled the gap has been the food companies. And the top 10 food companies supply about 70% of all our food. And they're essential monopolies that budgets of these companies are the same as most small to medium-sized countries.
Yeah.
So they can lobby and influence and pay for a lot of the research that goes on around the world in nutrition departments that is focused on their objectives and selling people more food and steering people towards their ultra-processed products, which no fault of theirs is actually has a much higher profit margin than currently natural foods. And so that's why we've ended up with 60% of all the calories eaten in the US and 50% in the UK being ultra processed foods now, which wasn't the case 30 years ago. And people that are making money out of that are the big food companies. And they're basically sponsored by our governments and taxpayers because of the way the whole food system works is just completely wrong. So it's not a simple thing to just say, this is why it's all wrong. But we've got into this mess that because of the power of these companies they have over government, means that government is very unlikely to change this status quo anytime soon. And I think that's why, in a way, people like myself bother to write books and go on talks like this to try and get a groundswell of ground up opinion to start talking about food and changing this from bottom up rather than top down.
Yeah, absolutely. And, many of the esteemed people I've had on the podcast, are part of this grassroots bottom up movement because the government agencies are not going to turn this corporate capture of food and the research and all of that around overnight. No one's going to be bold enough. Who would even be capable of doing that? They've tinkered with it in Brazil, some cities, and they've made bold moves in Mexico to ban all the advertising of junk food. But here, our whole food industry is founded on ready meals, filled with all kinds of chemicals and rubbish. And yeah, you said 50% ultra processed foods in the UK, 60% in the United States. And what was it? It's 10% in Portugal, 14% in France. So we've got to really change things. And, that's part of why I have you on. Now, the simplistic calories in, calories out, energy balance model, that has been shaming people who find it difficult to, keep trim and keep vital for a very long time. Tell us about how you've exploded this with your predict studies into the microbiome built on your twin studies. I know that's a big, heavy question. There's a lot to go in there, but just if you can draw a line through all of that.
Yeah, we could spend the whole hour talking about why calories are, if not irrelevant, vastly overestimated and a giant smokescreen for bad food and bad diet practices and the billion-dollar industry that is the diet industry. So studies have shown that calorie-restricted diets don't work long-term, and yet they're sold as the cure and without any evidence. But I think one of the big myths that we were able to explode in the Zoe predict studies was when we started giving this all calories are equal idea that calories of fat, calories of sugar, calories of whatever are the same in everybody, and that's really the central mantra of why you can then count it and use your watch and do some steps and calibrate exactly what's going in and out, which is all nonsense. But I think we showed in these predict studies, we took over 1,000 people, mostly twins, some in the US, some in the UK, and gave them all identical meals and looked at their blood profiles and showed that these are healthy people. When given identical muffins, you've got about a 10-fold difference in response to that identical muffin between people. And that was a metabolic response in sugar, in insulin, and in your fat levels. And that has consequences. And that long-term is going to make some people fatter than others because of these inflammatory sugar peaks. And so knowing whether you're someone who responds to that food with a peak or not, regardless of the identical calories going in, is going to be crucial. And that was the whole basis of setting up the Zoe company that is doing home testing to actually work that out. But the other killer experiment we did was noticing that after, again, an identical meal, about 1 in 4 people had a big sugar dip at 3 hours, which we don't normally measure in nutrition. You normally stop testing for sugar at about 2 hours, but it turns out that at 3 hours, a lot of people went below the baseline and had a sort of bounce back. And we looked at those people who they were blind to what was going on, so they didn't know. But it turns out those people 3 hours later were hungrier and had less energy than the people that didn't dip. And that hunger meant they actually ate about 250, 300 extra calories that day compared to people who hadn't dipped. And so the identical calorie has a very different effect on different people, meaning that all calories are absolutely not equal. And I think that, to me, it was a crucial experiment that will be one, end up being one of the most highly cited papers in nutrition.
And this is your latest paper, The Sugar Dippers, and discovering that, because and this is also a defense for people who don't have diabetes but may be on the verge of developing insulin resistance. I mean, there are some who say in our 40s and 50s, so many of us are walking around just on the precipice of tipping over into becoming type 2 diabetic because we've been insulin resistant, we've had maybe fatty liver as the launch pad for insulin resistance. And this is a defense for people having sugar monitors so they can come to some conclusions about how postprandially they react to foods, specific foods.
That's right. And currently these people are being advised by government guidelines to have low-fat products that tend to be high in starches and other sugars in order to prevent heart disease and diabetes. And it's, in fact, having the opposite effect on those people. So not only they're buying ultra-processed food, but it's highly likely to be accelerating them into diabetes rather than helping them in any way. So, yeah, most of the population are being misled at the moment because they don't have an insight into what's going on in their own bodies, and the government is telling them, just do this, which, if you look at the averages, in all around the world, has notably failed to keep anyone's weight down or reduce diabetes in the last 30 years. We're much worse off than we were. So it really needs we need a total reboot of all of this stuff. All this calorie stuff is nonsense and is just there so that people can stick nice, friendly labels on foods with low fat, low calorie, eat this, you'll be healthy. And it's making people sicker. And I think this is why these studies are so important about personalization. And, there are some people who can eat like that, but most people can't. And I think this is, for me, that sugar dip thing was really crucial because I didn't actually believe these stories of people who say, oh, I always have to have, I get a dip at 11 in the morning. I have to have a chocolate biscuit with my coffee, otherwise I'll feel faint, right? I just assumed that was purely psychological. But now, there's a real basis for it. But clearly, they shouldn't keep having calories. They shouldn't be having biscuits. They should change their breakfast and then not have that dip at all, and they'd be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you watch people on the tube when you're rushing to work or appointment in the morning and, they're munching on a croissant at 9 o'clock. And you just think, wow, you're setting yourself up for a world of trouble in a bit. You're going to have a sugar crash and then you're going to want a big sandwich filled with all kinds of rubbish. So I want also, though, just to go back to the twin studies and before we tuck into more info about the microbiome and how microbes are our friends, most of the good ones. What did you discover about the role of genes when it comes to individual responses to food, or, well, the responses of the genetic clones to food?
Well, in the twin studies, obviously, we'd seen that there's genes for obesity and where you put the weight on your body and things I'd been doing 20 years ago. And we also found there was some genetics of food preferences, which was interesting. So some people actually genetically prefer salads to more than other people, or like garlic or dislike garlic. So I was expecting quite a big genetic effect on our response to food, and that's why we used twins in the study. So I was shocked more than anyone to see these really trivial genetic effects. It was only about 30% for glucose and 4% for blood fats in terms of our response to these. So really, these are not genetically mediated responses. And I think that is really important, because that means that you can't just blame your parents. You can do something about it, and you can change that response by changing your food habits or your lifestyle. And so to me, that was, and to see identical twins with very different blood and fat responses, sugar and fat responses, also was very, and it's easy for the public to visualize identical twins and see, yeah, well, it can't just be genetic. And of course, there are many companies out there selling genetic solutions to nutrition, and in one go, you can just say, well, they're all rubbish, because, twins are the ultimate genetic test. If you had your co-twin next to you, that would be having the perfect genetic test done. And so you'd know that anything that's different between you couldn't be.
So it's nurture over nature, and lifestyle is pulling those lifestyle levers is what can put you on a much better metabolic path.
Absolutely. And we didn't realize this, because before then we'd only been looking at our baseline levels. What's your fasting blood sugar, your fasting blood fats, your cholesterol. And yeah, they have a strong genetic influence, but it's what happens when you eat something which is our natural state. And that's what's important. And that suddenly is very different and not under that genetic control. And to me, who spent most of my life studying twins and genetics, that was a bit of a wake-up call.
Yeah, and you have blown up the energy balance model, the eat less, move more. And I can't wait until we can start to move this into products that we can all access in order to discover the makeup of our microbiome and how to feed it properly. But I suppose with all that, I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. So what are your top tips, let's say? What do you recommend we do in order to diversify the bugs in our gut? And, perhaps, I guess, begin by explaining how many we've got and why they're all so important, and how they became so individualized. From birth, you would think we'd have a standard set. And yet, after birth, and even during the birth process, from what I understand, everything can change.
Yeah, so the microbiome is what we call a community of microbes, which are microscopic organisms, mainly talking about bacteria, but there's also other guys that are related, called archaea, and we also have fungi, we have parasites, and we also have viruses that feed off the bacteria. So all of that is a community, what we call the microbiome. And we're talking about 100, maybe 100 trillion of these individual bacteria, which is about the same number as cells in our body. So it's like having, we're half bug, half human. And the way to think about it now, and it keeps evolving, because we've only really known this stuff for the last 10 years. I think of the microbiome as a new organ in our bodies, because each one of these bugs is a chemical factory that works together with other bugs to produce the key chemicals in our bodies that go to our brains to change our mood, that go to our immune cells to fight COVID or give us food allergies, that digest our food, that send signals to our fat cells to put down more fat or to burn it up. And all kinds of effects on diseases. So think of it as an organ that you have to feed right, like having a liver or whatever, or a little garden inside you that you need to nurture well. So that's the way to think about it. And simply, we want to do two things for our microbiomes. We want to increase the diversity of species. The more species, the more different chemicals you can produce, the greater your sort of weaponry, if you like. at your disposal to tinker and get those levels right of your immune system. And the second thing is you want to increase the number of good bugs to bad bugs. So getting that ratio right. And so you can, mostly we're talking about good bugs, but there are still some bad guys, a few bad guys that you want to suppress. And the new tests that we're doing with Zoe, using the very latest genetic sequencing, allows us to tease these apart and give people profiles that they can actually are actionable in terms of the foods. So,
and I know, I mean, Zoe, there's a commercial aspect. You founded that company with others. Is the dream to have some sort of, for the masses, some sort of accessible, affordable for all, to equalize the field so that we can all access this information? Because, it's fantastic you've got the company, but not everybody's going to be able to afford to get those genetic sequencing microbiome makeup tests.
Absolutely, yeah. But we would love everyone, in the world to have access to this, whether it's through the app, which could be a free app, or it's getting the health services and insurance companies to pay for the microbiome testing, like, we get our blood cholesterol tested or our blood pressure tested today. And so that is definitely the aim. The prices have come down dramatically. Just 10 years ago, it would have cost you £10,000 to get your microbiome sequenced as an individual. Now you can, it's at volume, it's about £100. So in 10 years' time, it could, well, be £10. So I think these things are possible with scale, and that's generally the direction of travel we're on. But just talking about it, talking about the microbiome, talking about the different ways to think about food and the fact that everyone's different, I think everyone can get some of the way there, even if they, don't have the money, to pay £30 a month to get into these kind of tests. But I think we're moving towards getting more and more people involved, and it's an educational process as well as getting some people tested more than others. But the more people do it, the more the word gets spread, and I think that's part of this whole plan as well.
Yeah, step by step. I mean, you've said it's not one size fits all, but what's the one size for Tim Spector? Because I know that you have changed your eating patterns. You had a health scare in 2012. Could you tell us about that and what happened and what you changed about the foods that you were eating?
Yeah, so in 2012, I was doing some skiing in the Italian Alps, and been ski touring, which means walking up the hills rather than skiing down them, which is hard work and rather daft. But on the last day, I suddenly felt very unwell at the top and had trouble skiing down. I had double vision by the time I got to the bottom, and it turned out that I had a very small micro stroke, if you like, in the vessel supplying the nerves to the eye. That resolved after 3 months, but I was left with high blood pressure and, worries about my cardiac health. And so I said, I've got to sort out my life a bit. I don't want to end up like my father, who died young of a heart attack at 57. And so I went to the internet and tried to sort this out. And in a way, that really started my journey about writing books about nutrition and dedicating the rest of my career towards this aim, because it was so obviously wrong, everything that was out there on the internet. But I started testing myself. I started looking at my foods and realized that I had to start eating to improve my gut microbes. And that was the first thing I did, really changed my diet. And I experimented in all kinds of ways for a couple of years with all kinds of different diets and ways of eating.
Before you had this vision loss experience, what were you eating? Were you, the Eat Well guide or the standard American diet, the SAD diet, heavy on the carbs, heavy on the grains, you know,
Yeah.
just a
I,
small serving of plants that wasn't prioritized, or 5 a day, but didn't matter if you had 3 mangoes, which are really high sugar. You know, you weren't paying attention to all of that. You were just
yeah.
thinking, I'm eating healthfully, getting my 2,500 calories a day because I'm a bloke.
Yeah, well, I probably thought I was above average. Most people think they eat better than average in in the US and the UK. And I was a doctor, so I thought I have this extra knowledge. And of course, I had gone to low fat foods, and I was eating less meat, and I was eating more starchy foods, more rice, more pasta, more potatoes. Um, my breakfast would be muesli, um, with some maybe low fat yogurt and orange juice, or I'd have some brown toast, and maybe some marmalade. That and my lunch would be a hospital sandwich of brown bread and tuna and sweet corn, thinking that was healthy because I'm eating fish with a little bit of orange juice, maybe some potato crisps, and some fruit like grapes. I used to love grapes. And when I first got a glucose monitor on me, I found that that was a complete disaster. It was putting me into a low diabetic range when I was eating all these things at both at
Yeah.
breakfast and lunch.
You never
So
gave your system a rest. Just sugar spike, sugar spike, sugar spike.
absolutely. So it was like the worst possible thing for me. And so when I switched from that to sort of more full fat, balanced um, uh, diet, then suddenly, and I started eating from my microbiome, which was high fiber, lots of plant diversity. My general rule is, try to get 30 different plants a week, have fermented foods, and pick plants that are high in these polyphenols, these sort of defense chemicals that make them a bit bitter and colorful, and avoided ultra processed foods and some of the junk foods that I've been eating. Then suddenly, managed to lose 9 kilos. My blood pressure came down, and I had more energy. And I've kept refining it. It's not like I found the solution straight away. It was a slow process because I didn't have the tools like the Zoe kit at that
Yeah.
time. It was a lot of experimentation and things.
Well, you
And
went mainly vegetarian from what I've read from your website, and then now you're a careful omnivore. Because I know, because I got anemia among the many things that crashed and I experienced at menopause, and because I was vegetarian for 10 years, and I suddenly realized, okay, I am going to need to get the eggs back into the diet. I'm going to have to get some, despite my problems with eating animals, I am really going to have to bolster my B12 and some of the other the nutrient density you can get from animal products. So I've become an omnivore, and I keep red meat to a minimum, a palm-sized portion every couple of weeks. But my health has improved markedly since doing that. Are you the same? Are you an omnivore, or are you still mainly vegetarian?
well, I'm not sure how I define myself. Flexitarian. Um, so I was 5 years, yeah, like just like you, I was 5 years pretty strict vegetarian. But then I kept having problems with my B12 levels, which since I'd been a student and I got a nasty infection in the Middle East, I've had problems with it. And I was told that if that's low, that also causes problems with my blood pressure. So I started eating meat once a month, and trying to pick a small but really good bit of meat, high quality, very organic. And I do that, and I have fish maybe 2 or 3 times a month. And although I'm changing that because of the environment, I'm eating less fish than I used to. And I do eat up to 3 or 4 eggs a week as well. So it's definitely changed, and I'm not quite sure what I call myself. I would say I'm mainly plant it's certainly a plant-based diet with the odd additions. But my key for me is getting that diversity of plants, which is much more important than a term like being vegetarian, vegan, or whatever.
Right.
And all our studies show that it doesn't matter whether you don't eat something, it's what you do eat that's actually important for your health. So it doesn't matter that I eat meat once a month. What's really important is that on my plate, I've got massive variety of plants, nuts, seeds, all these things is a regular occurrence on my plate. So my microbes have got plenty of different chemicals to munch on. And I think that's the way I now see myself is I'm just like a zookeeper trying to get variety every day into my gut and always looking for new things to eat and regular fermented foods. So I always have a shot of kefir or, and try and get kimchi and kombucha and things as a regular occurrence.
And sauerkraut. And are you making that yourself, or have you found what I haven't been able to find, any commercial product that's actually good and has live microbes? Because the sauerkraut that you get in the many stores, it's in every shop here. It's not really got anything alive in it, does it? If it's sitting on a shelf.
Well, yeah, you can get kimchi and sauerkraut that are the proper stuff without vinegar. You just have to look a bit further, and it should have a very short sell-by date because it's alive. If it lasts for 2 years, then it's not the real thing. But these things are pretty easy to make yourself, and just a question of getting into the habit of doing these things. Small amount of work regularly it does it for you. And I now make my own sourdough bread as well, because I found that normal breads just give me a huge sugar spike.
Yeah.
But if I made my own sourdough, particularly if I add at least 50% rye, I don't get a sugar peak. And like most people, I love good bread. So I'm managing to still eat it without putting on the weight and doing the other things that my results were telling me I should avoid.
You mentioned anti-nutrients in plants earlier, and I'd like to get you to address the confusing matter of those anti-nutrients and lectins, because we read that lectins can be responsible for making people fat. They stimulate the insulin receptors, they block the leptin receptors, and they increase gastric juices and acid, really, and cause rhinitis and all of this stuff. So, we had who was it, Dr. Stephen Gundry, that did The Plant Paradox several years ago, that book that became a bestseller. And I had Prof. Tim Noakes on the show as well, and he was saying, plants are full of anti-nutrients that cause a lot of people serious amounts of gastric distress. What's your take on all of that?
Well, I don't want to go into detail about individuals and their views, but generally I'm against reductionism. And I think we've got to start moving away from, we made this mistake about macronutrients, about saying food can be divided into, there's only 4 numbers you need, the calories, proteins, fats, and sugars. And we know that's not the way to describe things. And we make similar problems when we start taking most foods we have, like a banana, has 600 chemicals in it. Are you going to say, I'm going to focus on one of them and show in some test tube that it has some effect on these hormones? No, it's irrelevant. It's how it acts together. And so I've looked at the lectin data, and I think there's nothing clearly scientific in it at all. And you're taking one item of food out of context, when it's not only that chemical out of context, but it's also out of context of what else is on your plate, of all the chemicals going together, how they're going to work on your body, which is far more complicated than any of us can ever put together. So you can have as many theories as you like about one of these 30,000 chemicals that we have in food and say it's bad for you. And I'd say to you, it's irrelevant. What about the other 29,000 that we regularly eat? They can counteract that. They can, uh, overall make it beneficial because of all these interactions that the human brain cannot comprehend. And that's why we need computers and AI now. And we've got to stop pretending, ah, yes, I know the answer to this. And nutrition world is full of people picking one chemical at random, writing a best-selling book, having a special diet, and getting followers. And we've just got to move away from that model. It's very childlike.
There's so much confusion and dissonance out there because we've had this 60 years failed experiment, the low fat, zero fat. I mean, I was a calorie accountant my entire life, and I thought it was the poster girl, abstemious with this, abstemious with that, and following to the letter the fraudulent advice, it turns out, zero fat. I mean, I don't think I had butter until post menopause when I thought, okay, I really need to dig into nutrition beyond the being a bad vegetarian, being a less than careful vegetarian. So I want to move on now with you to what I'll call the hottest non-potato in nutrition, in the nutrition world. I follow you on Twitter, and a few months back, you got a lot of stick when you shared an article in The Guardian and you quoted from it. It was about lab-grown meat. And you said, we'll be eating lab-grown meat and possibly fish within 5 years, as more than 70 firms are fighting to get the costs down. 80% of the UK public are open to the idea. And then, you said, you closed with the tweet with, nutrition is changing fast. And that did not go down well with so many of your followers, people declaring that they were going to stop feeding the Zoe COVID study app, more of which in a bit. And I know because I had Ben Bickman, Dr. Ben Bickman, the influential metabolism and fat scientist. I had him on the podcast, and I pulled a quote from it. He said, "I grow muscle cells in my lab. That is a shockingly intensive process that involves a myriad of chemicals, hormones included." So, we've had this outcry about genetically modified foods. And now, I mean, do you really think cultured meat, lab grown meat, is the way to go to save the planet and maximize our health when all these chemicals and, I don't know, hormones are going into the growing liquor, the growing liquid?
My view is that we need a combination of behavioral change and technology to get us out of this mess, and that we shouldn't rule out anything that is moving in those directions. And we have the power to alter the technology as we go. And the nice thing about cell culture meat is you know exactly what's going into it, unlike feedlots where you've got 30,000 cows being given stuff that you can't control, or antibiotics or growth hormones that you don't see, or what's in their feed. So, and then of course, once that animal's been killed, then you've got all these other 20 or so ingredients that go to make that into a frozen lasagna or something that mainly invisible to us at the moment. So I think you've got to look at what the alternative is. Lab, as far as I know it, lab cultured meat is not going to replace, the Kobe beef or the sort of the fine dining experience that you and I might have once a month if we do eat meat. It's going to replace the sausages, the burgers, the frozen foods,
Right.
the stuff that is currently ultra processed rubbish,
Yeah.
but is using animal cruelty and climate change problems using massive land, etc., and you're replacing it. So I think we have to be open-minded about these things and realize that, yeah, you can produce exactly the same muscle grown in a tank, and you know exactly what's gone into it, which you can control.
But do we know what's going into it? Because every article I've read seems to skate over what that cocktail of chemicals and hormones is that is going to help in the growth process.
Well, that's because they're still evolving, and they're trying to work out that what's the most efficient growth medium for these cells that doesn't use other animals, because they started off by using actually bovine syrup. So you'd grow it up with serum from other animals. Now they're trying to find ways that are vegetarian equivalents of that can be sustainable. So I think it's understandable that they are going through this process. So I think we mustn't be frightened of all new technologies just because it's new. When we look at the alternatives, which I think, the way processed meats are produced at the moment in the UK and the US is appalling. And no one would want to eat them if they knew exactly what was in it. So I think we're luckily in a position where within 5 years we are going to see cost parity between the cheapest burger and grown, from animals kept in feedlots in appalling conditions and lab meat, and the public will decide, similar to the way they have decided, with Impossible Burgers and these other plant-based equivalents of burgers already. So I think, there isn't going to be one solution to this, but as well as telling people eat better, because if you eat better, it's better for your gut microbes, it's also good for the planet. I think we also need to look at technological solutions, because we can't in 5 years make everyone go eating like us, just have meat once a month. It's not going to happen. And so now we've got the extra problems of the planet and climate change, and realize that the one thing people can do as individuals most to help the planet is to change their diets and eat less meat.
And we can also push for, rotational grazing and regenerative farming, honoring animals more, and never mind that whole subset of the industry, which is the ultra-processed meat derivatives rubbish. So there's a lot we can do to get carbon back in the soil. Soil depletion is a huge problem. Pesticides are everywhere. I mean, do we trust when something's labeled organic? I never do. I think if it's adjacent to a field that isn't organic, Mother Nature just blows things around. So the ingestion of pesticides, all of that, those are big questions. We could do whole podcasts and all of that. So let's get back to how you're teaching us to become microbes obsessives, which is all good as we pursue optimal health. But what are the other lifestyle factors that you recommend as we move to diversifying the trillions of friends we've got in our guts?
Okay, so I've mentioned 4 tips already about foods. So 30 plants a week, regular fermented foods, high polyphenol foods, and then avoiding ultra processed foods. Now, other things you can do is to avoid snacking and increasing the periods of time where your gut is rested. And this is used to be called intermittent fasting, and now is more called restricted time eating, where you're eating within for example, an 8 or a 10-hour window in the day, rather than this idea of grazing, which is what I was told at medical school and still taught today, is better than gorging. And all the studies are showing that metabolically, we should be eating for less time to leave our microbes more time to rest and recuperate and regenerate our gut lining. So that's one thing which, just by not what we eat, but how we eat, should be changed. So that means, not having the 5 meals a day that most people in the UK and the US do. You compress those into 2 or 3 meal events, and you try not to snack after them and give your gut a good rest. I always try and skip breakfast a couple of times a week and give myself a really good fast. And sometimes I will do longer fasts than that. Just generally feels good. I only try and do it when I'm working really hard, not when I'm sitting around at home by the fridge. But
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm the same. I do one meal a day, yeah, rarely two. And the cognitive bump you get when you're not obsessing about food and your next meal. I mean, the satiety that you get by eating properly, prioritizing protein, which I've found, and not loading up on the carbs and not constantly spiking your sugar. It's rather incredible. It's not a euphoria, but it's a calmness, I find. You know, you can get through the day. I have to have my caffeine in the morning. I don't know if you, what are your thoughts? Is polyphenols, caffeine, that's good? Do you still have coffee?
Oh, as much as I can get. Yeah,
Yeah.
up to 6 cups a day is good for me. So, yeah, it's the best way of getting polyphenols. If it's good quality coffee, it's hard to beat per serving. So yeah, definitely that. So and coffee doesn't. We think if it's black, it doesn't break your fast.
Yeah.
So well,
And
there's
it's
some debate.
delicious. It's delicious. I mean, once you get used to not, putting cow's milk in it or oat milk or any of these other crazy things, it's delicious. I look forward to it every morning and have a big cafetiere. And I think I'm down with you with the 6 cups. So we have to stop using antibiotics indiscriminately. I've read that when in your books. And what else do we need to do in order to give ourselves a fighting chance at having a healthy microbiome once we diversify the plants and look at the vegetable aisle as oh, what's that? I'm going to try that. That looks really cool, and I've never had that before.
Well, the other factor. I mean, I think we've touched on most of them, but lifestyle is important. Getting out of the city, um, getting a dog as a pet helps your microbiome. Going to the country and hugging trees is probably a good thing to do. Uh, getting, I know you don't like organic plants with a bit of soil on them is probably good for you. Um, Getting kids to play outside in real dirt is probably good for microbes as well.
Yeah.
Sleep is good for your microbiome. We've found some studies in the Zoe Predicts that your sleep is really important. If you can get to bed half an hour earlier, it makes a big difference to your metabolism the next day. So ways of de-stressing and things are all linked to your gut microbiome. So it's not just what you eat; it's also how you eat. And I think looking at successful countries like the Mediterranean ones, where you never see people eating at the bus stop.
Yeah.
They always sit down and they don't eat at their desks either, the way
Yeah.
we do. And they don't have snacks, so they just compress them into, and I was amazed. I wrote in a book book I'm writing at the moment that crisps, potato chips. The French actually eat more than the British do, but they tend to have them with their meals.
Yeah.
So it's not a separate event, and that probably means they're not nearly as harmful for them. So I think it's just being a bit intelligent about putting your meals together, eating and giving your gut a good rest, and sitting down having proper meals rather than a pretend meal. It's best not to have it and just say, like we do, is just say, well, I'll have even more when I get home, and I'll look forward to that. And just trying to this delayed gratification, I think.
Yes,
We
absolutely.
need to learn more rather than this instant gratification that is so much part of our culture.
Well, it's so funny because the UK culture is so different. And I'm Canadian. I came here from Canada. So there's a lot of crossover between UK and Canada. But I lived 5 years in France and then 5 years in Switzerland. And the French experience was a revelation because I'd worked, at CBC, BBC, all of these, high stress, high octane environments, newsroom. Everything needs to be done yesterday, and the patient might die if you don't get it on the air. And it was amazing to go to France, and I was a chief editor, so I was in charge of running the newsroom. And what's funny is everybody would down tools at lunch. And I kid you not, is it Begovic could have been doing this, Arafat could have been doing that. Nobody cared. It was lunch. And we were all going to not just have half an hour, shove a sandwich in our faces at our keyboards. We were going to have 90 minutes for lunch, sometimes 2 hours. And we'd go out. There was a tennis court um, on the in the news complex there, and it was so fabulous to see. And all of the women who were eating huge plates of food, they were gorgeous, lithe, wonderful. They didn't have any issues with obesity. And it was that whole context of eating nutrient dense food, socially, beautifully presented, taking the time and not doing what we do. It's so funny when I came back to the UK and I was at a UK newsroom after that experience, the first 5 year one. Everybody rushing, oh, I don't have time for lunch, and going to the chain shops and grabbing like your tuna sweet corn sandwich, and just literally taking 3 seconds in, not even looking out a window, not honoring the joy that you can find in food. So yeah, we really need to stop and take up the French way of living.
Yeah, no, I worked at a hospital in Brussels, and everyone left, for 2 hours. All the consultants actually went home for lunch in those days. Unbelievable. But yeah, that's the way it was. That's priority in many countries, and those countries are still doing better than those that don't prioritize, the importance of yeah, not just what you eat, but the social aspects as well.
Yeah. Do you foresee a time when we will be able to supplement, grab a supplement or maybe little bags of microbe rich dirt and buy them? And once we know our microbiomial profile, I mean, do you see? I'm just thinking in an entrepreneurial way, the business opportunity there. We could have these things, these additions, because I know we're not at the point yet where we can have fecal matter transfers that can chop and change and give people who are prone to putting weight on, because I'm prone to putting weight on. I don't think I've got any of the skinny bacteria in me, but I know that we're a ways away from being able to with precision tools change that, aren't
Well, we're
we?
getting closer. So, you know, we could test your microbes and give you a list of certainly the top 15 or 20 and the worst 15 or 20. And then we know from our studies which foods are likely to increase them and which are likely to decrease them. So that's what we're doing with the ZOE program now, is giving people boosters to boost your good microbes and suppress your bad ones. So, that is based on our recent studies in Nature Medicine. So it's pretty new science. And we're going to do better and better every year as more and more people do these studies and contribute their data. So we can work out the links between how to improve your good microbes with specific foods. And the more people do that, the more precise the advice we get. So as well as your diet, we can then, I think, move towards what you're talking about, is, getting these maybe prebiotic supplements that would say, okay, we've got a mix of these 20 foods that are going to boost your microbes. We'll freeze dry them, and we'll put them in a special gel for you, and you can have that as an addition. But I still think, I mean, although we can do that, I'm still a big fan of real food, and that many other things in that food is probably good for you as well. So, it's like broccoli is always going to be better than a broccoli supplement.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I was going to get you to dig into the COVID study app that you've been running as well, but I think we might need a whole nother podcast for that, because, just suffice it to say that you have been gathering all this data throughout the pandemic, people valiantly logging their symptoms, etc. And you have been able to inform the authorities about what's happening out there and fill in so many of the missing blanks that we've had. I mean, even just last week you were tweeting, or was it last month, tweeting about sneezing is now an issue. It's not just loss of smell, and taste, which was one of your predictions that you first alerted all of us to, sneezing and a runny nose. So what have we got now that you've added to the symptoms mix?
Yeah, so we've actually, for a few months, we've actually been telling people and the government that symptoms have changed. Uh, and some of this is due to the Delta variant that basically is giving us sneezing, runny nose, sore throat, uh, and upper respiratory problems much more than the old variants did. So we're not getting the classical symptoms nearly as much as we used to. And that's why in the UK, where there's no guidance on this, we're missing about 40% of COVID cases at the moment. That's why our cases are so high. And all this is because we've got 4 million people downloaded the Zoe app and gave us their symptoms, linked it to whether they were positive or negative, and we put this all in this AI program together, really, in the same way we were doing with nutrition, but suddenly we transferred this to the COVID world. And just by interacting with the public, realizing that, anyone who gives us their data also gets data back and their own insights into what's happening in their own area, and etc. It's been a fantastic, mind-blowing exercise, really, and we had no idea it'd be so successful. So we still have 1 million people after 18 months logging every day, telling us what is going on in their area and in their bodies. And I think this is the new way we're going to be doing health in the future.
It's amazing.
Forget waiting 3 weeks to see a GP. These apps are going to really be the absolute way forward. And the 4 million people have had a taste of that there. They're not going to go back the old way.
This takes the practice of epidemiology and the algorithms and all of that to a whole new level, as you say. It must be incredibly gratifying for you to have had such a big role in this. This is a once in a lifetime event, hopefully, for you and I, definitely. Let's hope there aren't, pandemics every 10 minutes. So, I mean, how does it make you feel that you've been able to use your knowledge and transfer it to an urgent problem?
No, it's great. I mean, most of my career has been writing lots of papers that nobody saw or acted on, and been great for my ego and my professional advancement, but it hasn't actually done anything. So, both with the nutrition stuff that we've been doing is really changing people's lives with the Zoe product. And so proud to, I just came up with the idea, but people actually did the work, were the Zoe team that in 5 days created an app that the government couldn't do in 6 months. And a really small dedicated team just showed what you can do with a bit of motivation. And I think then, of course, we engaged the public, and it became this citizen science program that really people wanted to say, well, the government are doing nothing. Why don't, if we all do this together, we can help each other. And I think that was the most amazing feeling, at 48 hours when you had 1 million people downloading the app, saying this is great, thank God, I want to help other people and work out what's going on. That was the most amazing feeling. So I've been really lucky. It needed a lot of luck, because if we'd been a bit later, if we'd been in a different country, if we didn't have the Zoe startup team right next door who were dedicated to it, nothing of this would have happened. And the government, may have, as they tried to close us down, but they could have been more effective and nothing would have happened. So,
as they tried to close us down, huh? What?
Yeah, there's a whole other backstory on that, but it wasn't a government-led approach. It wasn't NHS. It was a private company. They didn't want that happening. They were worried that it would detract from the NHS app. Okay. So there was a lot of politics behind the scenes just to keep it going for the first few months. Although now it's now funded by the Department of Health, but it was a battle to get it there.
Wow. What a trajectory. How amazing.
It's been a journey, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't imagine being you. I'd be bursting with pride every day. Would I be able to contain myself? My smile would always be too big to fit my face. Now, I want to also bounce around a little bit with aging. How do you feel about longevity, the whole push for health span, never mind the lifespan extension radicals out there. I did read that, I mean, you did all the twin studies, and there was a big focus on the diseases of aging and diseases in general, chronic diseases, not just born of lifestyle. Um, I read that you microdose metformin. Tell us about that. Why are you doing that?
Well, as part of my experimentation, really, as uh, I've been experimenting with my diet, and I found out that I am sort of pre-diabetic anyway. And so I knew I had a problem with sugar, and I was going to these aging conferences and learning more about this mysterious drug metformin that seems to have all these weird other effects, that people, and animals live longer and get less disease and cancer and things in ways they can't understand. So we were working on biological aging with various markers. And so I thought I'd do a test for a year and see what happened to my markers of biological aging in that year by taking half dose metformin, just 500 milligrams, which wouldn't be the dose you take in for diabetes and anything. And I felt fine on it, and clearly it had some effect on my sugar levels slightly, but basically I managed to, in 1 year, reduce my biological age by 4 years. And so that was kind of cool result, which I wasn't expecting.
So you're going to keep doing it?
Yeah, I think I will, unless I get some side effects or something, or I hear anything to the contrary. It seems a pretty a good thing to do until there are some trials coming along. I'm not saying I'd recommend it for everybody, but I'm prepared to take a bit of a risk, because I have access to lots of medical care, and I can see what it's doing to my body and take regular glucose tests and things. So yeah. I suspect that these trials are going to show it is going to be good, and I think it's going to be one of those drugs that a lot of people will be on in 5 or 10 years' time.
It's so funny. I haven't gone there yet because I have this thyroid issue, Hashimoto's, and apparently metformin can interfere with that. But I did have the pleasure and honor of having Dr. Nir Barzilai on, who's doing the TAME trials, the esteemed geroscientist, and he of course takes metformin, and a lot of these other guys that are at the leading edge of the longevity industry. So that's very interesting. Now, I realize I've had you on for probably more than the full hour, so I just want to wind things up with a few quickies, in time-honored interviewer fashion, some quick hits to get some short answers from you. Have you had a role model in your life?
I've had lots of role models, but each stage of my life has been different. So I haven't had one that I can say I've followed, because, I did medicine, rheumatology, epidemiology, genetics, microbiome, nutrition. So there's no one I know who I can follow really apart. But I appreciate anyone who goes out on a limb to change from being in the comfort zone of their own discipline to something new. Anyone like that, I take as a role model, and there are a few of those around.
Best career move, was it leaving rheumatology? Not to, diss rheumatologists because they're very important, but it wasn't for you.
Yeah, probably, but I think it was probably actually when I left mainstream medicine and did a master's in epidemiology, which really broadened all my horizons. And that suddenly just, you take a year out and you just study every disease, and you get a toolkit on how to look at disease. And I think that probably would be the sort of change in my mindset in my career. So that allowed me to think about working, across disciplines more than anything.
Next quickie question. What lights you up without fail?
Being at the top of a mountain in deep snow, ideally in the Canadian Rockies, that would in powder skiing. That's what I dream about. And that's what I do most years.
So that would be your happy place.
Yeah, definitely.
And I do want to give a nod here to Desert Island Discs because I think it's the best radio show format of all time. What song for you, if you were banished to some faraway place and you had to stay there and hear the same track over and over and over again, would there be one you could choose?
Um, David Bowie's Life on Mars, and I can't explain why. Just it was as I was growing up, I was a big David Bowie fan, and that's the one that just gives me goose pimples every time I hear it.
Oh, fantastic. And I'd make sure you have an amazing sound system so it could be cranked up max. You said there's no perfect meal for everyone. What's the Tim Spector perfect meal? Let's say 3 ingredients and you can have some red wine afterward.
Well, it have to involve cheese. So unpasteurized cheese. I will probably have some kimchi and so this is something I've got to eat every day. So the rest of my life. Yeah, so that and glass of red wine and probably a good Spanish peach.
Gorgeous. Now, last one in the quickie file. What is the character trait that you cherish the most? So, the thing that makes being you pretty darn fabulous.
I'm not sure about making me being fabulous, but I think that makes it very annoying is probably being inquisitive, like being a sort of detective about everything, wanting to know why everything happens. So it's a character trait that's very annoying for my family, for example, but I find probably defines me best. But,
And it's led you to down so many different rabbit holes. So, and we are all benefiting from your curiosity and your inquisitiveness. I really thank you so much, Tim Spector, for coming on The Big Middle. You are an action man. Anybody who wants to read about you, there was a gorgeous piece in the Financial Times profiling you and all the extreme sports you get up to. That was just a few months ago, and it was really lovely. I read it late last night and I went, wow. So there's a lot to dig into with you. You are pretty darn fabulous. I'm going to say that, with no qualifications. You are an explorer of nutrition, genetics, and rampaging pathogens that cause pandemics. I can't thank you enough for sharing all of this with us.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And hopefully people out there can do their own experiments and join us on this great journey.
I mean, you're showing us the way. That's the future, precision health. Thank you so much. Until next time, many thanks for your support. Thank you for listening and for watching. I'll roll out the video when I can in the coming days. And yeah, that's it from me. Go well. Oh boy. I was so mindful that I've eaten up so much of your time. I junked a whole bunch of questions because I just thought, no, it doesn't feel right to go there now. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, that's great. Will you have a link to the Join Zoe website?
Absolutely.
I didn't mention it.
I'm
It's
even going to put the FT article in, and I'll put your Twitter. You're very active on Twitter, aren't you?
Instagram as well, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll put Twitter, Insta, and if there's anything I might not find, because your website, tim.co.uk, you're not really using that so much anymore, are you? I saw the blogs were 2016, 2017.
No, it's more on Instagram and so the joinzoe.com website for anything on nutrition really, and then Instagram and Twitter.
And the best bio And predict and all of that, would that be your bio at King's College? Would that be a good one to link to? Or, I mean, what's the meatiest one? And I will post the FT article, but I just, because predict requires so much more digging, and the twin studies, it's all massively fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not sure any of them are up to date, really. But I haven't. Someone said Wikipedia is quite good, but I haven't
Oh,
looked recently.
okay. Well, I'll put a chunky wedge in the show notes, and then if when this goes out, if you go to my website and see what I've put, if you see, oh, she missed out on that, just drop me a line
That's great.
through Is It Victoria? Anyway, I can't thank you enough.
Okay,
I've said that a
lovely.
hundred times. So have a
Great.
good day with that glorious view.
Will do. Thanks a
Okay,
lot.
ciao, bye.